think everybody's in. Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mary Ellen Brogan. I'm a Senior Director of Marketing over at Wood System of Care. So thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited about this presentation. So just a couple quick housekeeping items. We are going to be recording this session just so for those that registered and can't make it, they'll be able to view it after. We'll send it out to everybody as well so they have it. We should have everybody's mics and camera off. So if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We are going to have some time at the end for Ryan to answer all of our questions. And I think that is it for right now. So I want to introduce our speaker, Ryan Gordon. Ryan is a financial advisor at Raymond James and Associates. He's going to talk to us today about financial strategies using special needs trust. So Ryan, thank you again for being here, and I'll hand it off to you.
Oh, thank you, Mary Ellen, and pleasure, honor to be here. Again, my name is Ryan Gordon. I'm a financial advisor with Raymond James. I'm a founding partner of a group here called Interval Wealth Advisors, and we specialize mostly with families and individuals. We're not really on the big corporate retirement plan side. We do mostly individual wealth planning, wealth management. We also a big part of something that's really near and dear to my heart is helping people with special needs trusts, helping families that are navigating what to do, when to do it. Um, it hits home personally as it does. I think there's probably very few people who it doesn't hit home with. And a lot of people that I talk to don't always know that these strategies are out there that can really help their loved ones. So again, I'm honored and honored to be here, just so everyone has a little bit of background knowledge of what my role is in these situations. You'll see a legal disclaimer at the end that I don't give legal advice, I don't give tax advice. My role in the entire thing in my clients' lives is to really help with the big picture, to make sure that we're putting together strategies that help um, for long-term success for their finances. So especially when it comes to families that have someone in the family that has special needs, uh, helping them with the resources, with the planning, eventually, with the investment management as well to make sure that the special needs trust is funded and running correctly. We try to quarterback that situation and make sure it all goes smoothly. A little bit just about Raymond James and Raymond James Trust. So Raymond James Trust was chartered in 1992. It is a subsidiary of Raymond James Financial. They have 7 offices in the U.S. So they serve as the trustee, the agent, the custodian, and the personal representative for trusts. They handle about 9 billion in assets as far as trust goes. And the neat thing about Raymond James Trust is of that 9 billion, almost half of it actually deals with special needs trust. The 2 people at the head of it come from a background specifically helping families with special needs trust. So again, it's really near and dear to our company. It's really near and dear to me. So the advantage of it is, you have the strength and stability backed by Raymond James, and then you have the local contact. So there's the trust company, and then the local contact is your advisor who helps with that. And a lot of philanthropic resources too from Raymond James Trust. I did want to get a poll together. We don't really have the polling capabilities on here, but I'm going to ask everyone to put an answer. I'm going to take like 30 seconds. If you could put an answer into the chat. Um, just want to gain some of the experience in the room and see how much people know where they're coming from. So the quick question, have you ever heard of special needs trusts before today? And I guess the 3 answers you can choose from: yes, I have heard of them or have one established. 2, I've heard of them but don't know too much. Or 3, this is brand new to me and completely foreign. Seeing a lot come through, a lot of mix, which is good. Um, so I see someone who's a medical advocate for someone with a trust, heard of it, but a lot of people saying they know what it is, but they don't know too much. This is going to be a high level overview of how it can help. Again, I can't give tax advice. I can't give legal advice. I don't draw up legal documents. But I'll be able to give enough information that will at least be able to guide whether it's you or someone you know, um, on where to get started and what the benefits are and why we use them. So thank you for participating in that poll. So just understanding what a special needs trust is. So trust in general, it's a legal tool, and a special needs trust is a tool that helps someone else, a trustee, manage money or assets for someone with disabilities. So the main reason we use them is to protect eligibility for benefits. We will get into that very shortly, because these benefits have very strict limits on how much money someone can have. So without a trust, like even a small inheritance, could really throw off the benefits that someone is receiving from the government. So the way we like to think of special needs trusts is think of it as like a protective container. Think of a jar, and you put all the assets inside that jar, and that way, when all the assets are in the jar, it allows it to protect from disabling the benefits that are outside of the jar. Um, some of these benefits, and I'm going to, try not to repeat myself too much, but some of it does come up again. But just for a brief example, therapy, education, transportation, all these things that someone with special needs or with disabilities might need that they're getting from or that they're not getting. Uh, their way, special needs trusts is something that helps us establish a way to shelter assets to be able to pay for those things without ruining our benefits. So again, it's a legal setup. The trustee manages the money or other assets that are within the trust for someone with a disability. And um, as I mentioned, the two main benefits that we're looking at are Social Security, so SSI or Medicaid. So these are government benefits that people with disabilities get when they reach adulthood, and the programs, they have very strict limits on how much income or how much savings a person can have. So even a small inheritance, as I mentioned, can really throw that all off. So if someone with special needs, let's say, inherits X amount of dollars, $250,000 because of a parent passing away or whatever it might be, um, they if there's no trust set up, they are very much at risk of losing a lot of their benefits until that money is drawn down. So the trust helps hold those benefits. It owns those benefits for benefit of uh, the beneficiary, who would be the person with special needs, and that's going to allow them to keep receiving those benefits because they don't own them. So the trust, it acts as a financial buffer. And again, it's instead of the beneficiary owning the assets in directly, the trust owns them. There's a trustee assigned that manages the assets. So this way, the money's available, and can improve the person's quality of life, but it doesn't count against their benefit limits. So they're designed to cover supplemental needs, things that go beyond basic food and shelter. Might include therapies, education, assistive technology, transportation. It can even help pay for things like hobbies or social activities. And these are things that government programs don't cover. So they make a huge difference in the day-to-day life of the person with a disability or the person with special needs. And being able to pay for those things without ruining or losing their government benefits can really help with quality of life. So, an example: a parent wants to leave money to their child. If they leave it directly, the child could lose access to the Medicaid or Social Security. But if they set up a third-party special needs trust, and we'll get into the differences between first-party, third-party, pooled shortly. But if they open up or establish that third party special needs trust, the money's managed in the trust by a trustee for the child's benefit. Um, the trustee might use the funds to pay for physical therapy, or maybe it's a wheelchair accessible vehicle or some sort of educational program, and the child continues receiving the government benefits, and the family knows that the child is supported and doesn't have to worry about those things. So there are three main types of special needs trusts, and they each serve different purposes depending on the source of funding. I think you'll hear that there's clearly a bias when one can be done, and I, th- I tend to have a lot of themes and overarching themes that you'll notice throughout the presentation when we talk about this. But the first one to talk about is a first party special needs trust. So this is established when the beneficiary already owns the assets. So if you have someone that's going to be able to receive benefits and they already own these assets, maybe from personal injury settlement or an inheritance, savings that were already in their name, because the assets are legally owned by them and then put into the trust, the government requires a Medicaid payback at the very end. So this means that when the beneficiary passes away, any remaining funds will have to first reimburse the state for Medicaid benefits that were received. So not going to throw too many numbers out there, but you pay X, or you were paid out X in Medicaid benefits, um, and the estate was left with $700,000 at the end of it in the trust. If it was established as a first party trust, you would be required to pay back up to a certain amount of that X dollars before the rest of the assets were to pass to another beneficiary. So if there's another sibling, or and we'll talk a little bit also about, if there's maybe something charitable after the person, the beneficiary of the trust passes, that you wanted the assets to go to, you can't do that as easily with a first party uh, special needs trust, because it's you're going to lose some of that. Third party special needs trust is when the assets never belonged to the beneficiary in the first place. So instead, they come from someone else, parent, grandparent, living relative, whoever it might be, and they set up the trust ahead of time and they fund it. The trust becomes the beneficiary of everything. So all the funds in their lifetime through their estate plan, will, life insurance, whatever it might be. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how to fund some of these. Everything is left to the third party trust from the start. So it's never actually owned by the beneficiary. And because the beneficiary never legally owned the assets, Medicaid payback is not required. It'll allow the remaining funds to be passed on to other heirs, to a charitable purpose, whatever it might be. It really helps. As I mentioned, my job is to try to look at the overall financial picture, the overall um, plan for the entire family. And if we have a secondary goal after making sure that this person that we love is taken care of after they're gone, it goes to a cause that we're really near and dear to us, or whatever else it might be. The third party special needs trust really helps make sure that that can happen more effectively. Pooled special needs trusts. So this is when a nonprofit organization combines the resources from multiple beneficiaries into a single trust. So their separate accounts are maintained. So just because they're pooled doesn't mean it's all going into one account. So there's still ways that everyone has their pool of money, but because they're pooled, um, it allows them to be managed together. So, and this is usually when a lot of corporate trustees and trust companies have minimums that are maybe a little more than what people have planned for. So when there's a relatively small amount, and a professional trustee is preferred, these pooled special needs trusts can be really helpful. For example, and again, not to get too ahead of myself, but we will discuss a little bit about how to fund these things. So when I say a statement that Raymond James Trust has $1 million minimum, we have ways to fund that without actually putting $1 million away. But if it doesn't meet that $1 million minimum, let's say the trust has $300,000, but it's best for a professional trustee and not a family member to manage the trust. This is where a pooled special needs trust can be very, very helpful. They do have Medicaid payback provisions, so they are required to do Medicaid payback, but the nonprofit may retain a portion of the remaining funds and to support its mission. Just give a quick example. You have a grandparent that names a grandchild directly into their will, and the money goes to the grandchild. To preserve the benefits, it's going to go into a first party special needs trust. This is where that's an example of what would happen. So, um, to do the same example, the grandparent names, if the trust is already established and the grandparent names the trust as the beneficiary, then it could be left to a third party special needs trust, and there's no Medicaid payback required. Again, we do find this to be the most effective and efficient way to do it. Um, so, want to look a little bit about how we integrate this into our overall financial plan, broader financial plans, and this is where, my role as a planner working with families, or your role as the family member, um, really helps come into play. And just remember, not to give the disclaimer again, but the it's a team effort because I don't draft up the documents. My company will review your documents. We have lawyers that can help review and point out where some of the flaws are, but we don't actually draft the documents. So when you're looking at the overall plan, it's really important to look at the big picture and make sure that all the pieces work together. So you really need to have a lot of coordination. You need to coordinate the financial planner. You need to coordinate the estate attorney, because you need to be able to take care of things like will, power of attorney, and healthcare directives, and make sure everything is buttoned up and nice. That way, you know, when in the inevitable case of someone passing, everything transfers to the trust correctly. So these pieces, they all work together to make sure that your wishes are carried on. Um, I do want to talk about funding strategies. I mentioned that I would get to this because this is where a lot of questions come up. People sit there and they say, I know that my loved one is going to need X amount. I don't have, what do I do? How do I get there? And this is where the financial planning really integrates into it well. Um, so you can fund it with just a lump sum. If you have the lump sum ready, uh, simple enough. You just can either establish the trust, put the money into the, pass it to the trust. Not everyone is there or is able to do that. And again, that can come from inheritance or sale of a property. So that's where the lump sum. Um, you can do ongoing gifts over time. So this would be, especially when you have maybe a younger family that's still in the wealth accumulation stage. So they're still gaining assets, little by little, whether it's a periodic plan or whatever it might be, they can put money in over time. Um, One of the most popular options, and it's something that an estate attorney, I have a few resources for estate attorneys that handle special needs trusts, and the one says, like, if you don't have enough assets now, she requires you to have a certain amount of life insurance, and it's a great way to fund it. You purchase the life insurance policy, uh, whether it is a term policy or a permanent policy. There's a lot of strategies you can go into for these types of policies that can really help fund it. But that's a perfect way to do it. When you inevitably pass, the money for then you name the trust as the beneficiary goes into the trust, and that's a good way that if you don't have the assets, but you're going to need this much for the beneficiary, it's a good way to really make sure that it happens. Particularly, there's something called a second to die policy for married couples. So um, both people own it, and then when they both pass is when the beneficiary finally gets the money. So it's a way to ensure that the trust is funded without having to set aside that large uh, sum. So do you want to talk a little bit about tax implications? This is not tax advice, just legal, just that disclaimer again, not tax advice, but it is important to understand what the tax implications are. And I will say that everybody's tax implications are different. So make sure you have a good, trusted tax advisor working with you as well. So again, depending on how the trust is set up, it may generate taxable income. And that means that the trustee, whether it's a family member or professional, needs to really be careful about how and when money is distributed. So certain distributions could trigger taxes or even affect the beneficiary's eligibility for benefits. So again, it's why it's really important to work with professionals, um, advisor, a tax advisor, estate planner, making sure that I said it earlier is everything's very buttoned up, strategic. That way, you don't do something, make one little mistake, that could have really negative implications moving forward. Um, uh, I, I like analogies, and a really simple analogy is that the trust is car. It's a vehicle, truck, whatever you want to say, some sort of driving vehicle. And your estate plan is the GPS. It's what navigates. It gives you all of your directions. Turn left here, go straight there. That's the estate plan. It's what's giving direction to everything. Your funding strategy, so what you work on with someone like me, the financial planner, that's going to be your fuel. It's what keeps everything moving along. And then your tax management is your maintenance. So you need oil changes, you need to get your brakes changed. That's what your tax management is. It's not something that you're going to be doing all the time, but when you do it, if it's not done right, everything can fall apart. So you really need to make sure that the maintenance is correct. So just a few legal and administrative essentials. As far as, trustee selection, it's very important to understand the different types of trustees, um, and how you choose the right trustee. So it's one of the most important decisions you can make while setting up the special needs trust. So the trustee is the person, or it's sometimes the institution, responsible for managing the trust assets and making decisions about how and when the funds are used for the beneficiary's benefit. Um, it can carry a lot of responsibility. It's important to choose someone who is not only trustworthy, but they also need to understand the rules around government benefits, especially when it comes to special needs trusts. And they need to have the time to properly manage the trust as well. This is just a 101 for all trusts. You always have some sort of trustee, and this trustee is bound by the legal documents, but also needs to be able to um, carry out what the legal documents want. So if the special need trust document doesn't state specifically the way things need to be distributed or can be, whether it's periodically, it's really on the person who is managing the trust, the trustee, to make sure they know all the ins and outs that way, because they won't be able to do anything that the trust document doesn't allow. But if the trust document is a little too vague in spots here or there, and they don't properly distribute funds, again, that's where it can really have some bad implications. So family members are often trustees. There's nothing wrong with a family member, a trusted family member who is going to understand the beneficiary and understand the beneficiary's needs. And I think it's really important. And that's why people do choose a family member a lot. We all are learning about this, or the people that are affected by this, you know, they truly just want to see their, whether it's family or their loved ones, be able to live the best life possible, which is why they're setting this up. And of course, a family member is a lot of times the one who can help do that. But again, they have to be able to manage it properly. There are professional fiduciaries, so banks, trust companies, um, they are able to manage it as well. And if the trust is complex, um, or if you want to avoid family dynamics interfering with financial decisions, this is a good way to go. So, on the one hand, I talk about how family wants, a lot of times wants what's best, but sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes, the family dynamics are not ideal. And so if you don't want family dynamics to play a factor in it, you can hire a professional fiduciary. For those, who don't understand, the word fiduciary is thrown around a lot. It's, in the most simple terms, it's someone who puts the needs of someone else ahead of their own legally. So um, there's no one size fits all for this. It's really very specific to each individual situation. So it depends on your family, it depends on your goals, and it also really depends on the complexity of the trust. There are other things that you can use to help, though. So to add an extra layer of protection, you can appoint a trust protector. This is someone who isn't involved in day-to-day decisions or management of the trust, but they have the authority to step in if something goes wrong. So if the trustee becomes incapacitated, or if they start making poor decisions, and like very clear poor decisions, the trust protector can come in, they can remove and replace that person. And it's a way to really make sure that the trust, it stays on track over time. Another helpful tool, a memo of intent, and uh, also can be just called a letter of intent. And it's not a legal document, but it is incredibly valuable. It's where you, as the parent or the caregiver, you can write down everything someone might need. So it could include medical needs, foods, communication preferences, spiritual beliefs. It can really just include, it's like just a guide sheet to the beneficiary. And it's for future trustees and caregivers. So something that really helps them understand and not just the financial needs, but it also helps them understand the human side of the beneficiary's role. One thing to take into consideration when we're talking about these things is that not all the trustee doesn't always stay the same throughout the entirety of the trust being around. So let's take an example where you have two siblings. One was named the trustee for the other siblings special needs trust where they're the beneficiary. Um, there's a lot of times will be a secondary trustee named for if anything were to happen. You want to have provisions for if anything were to happen. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have a corporate trustee be that secondary trustee. So the next trustee to take over if anything were to happen to the first trustee. That's a great place for where the memo of intent would come in. It really will help make sure that the family member uh, is really looked after with a personal touch and not just made sure that the trust is designed and carried out. You know, we want to make sure that all the things that matter besides the financial aspect um, still get carried out and still are important. So I dumped a lot there for now. We're not we're not done yet, but I do want to take this moment. We're about halfway through, and just do another quick little poll. I'm gonna quickly take a look. Um, no questions yet, so good time for a poll. Besides, I do see Peg. Just so people understand, I have to get everything compliance approved, and I just have to get compliance to say okay for me to distribute the slides. So if they do, I will be happy to provide them. Shouldn't be an issue. But next poll, who do you think would be the best trustee? Just based off of what you've learned, would you pick a family member, a professional, or are you still not sure? I'd love to poll and see what everyone out there thinks so far. So I've seen professional, I see not sure, professional, sibling. So it looks a little mixed. So I have someone a really good, Jeanette. Thank you for your comment. I've experienced and seen a lot of issues within families I'm sorry, and maybe it's best to get an objective party. So that's um, that's a really, really good point, and I think it's important. But again, I think other family dynamics, you know, are not so sometimes just so you know, it's not always a sibling. I again, I don't advocate either way because I think every situation is very individualized, and I think every situation deserves its own look at it. Um, I know I personally have a one of my closest friends who has a sister with a special needs trust, and their mother is a fantastic trustee. So I wouldn't just say the family dynamics are always an issue. They're not. So it's really specialized. But what I will say is a fiduciary or a corporate trustee, someone who's a professional, it's what they do, has a much more guaranteed rate of success, which I see Dan, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there. Could be more expensive. You are correct. It does have a cost to it, but it can be something that could be accounted for with a good plan ahead of time as well. Um, all right, so we're going to move on to the, oh, Mary
Ryan, just
Ellen,
to
you just,
hop in real quick, I just didn't want to miss Karen's question if you want to take that now. How much does it cost setting up a trust if there's a range?
there's, honestly, I'm not super comfortable giving a range because that
Okay.
is really on the estate attorney. And the estate attorney, I can't say it's going to be it's really tough to get the range because that is between the estate attorney and the client. Like my guidance, you're not paying, especially I'm not charging for the guidance per se there, so I can't say because I'm not the one who establishes the documents. Really, the only cost there is to setting up the special needs trust is as far as like just the documentation is working with an estate attorney or some sort of attorney that drafts the trust documents and creates the legal entity for the trust because that's what it is. It's a legal entity, so it has to be. You have to have like a legal entity created. It gets its own tax ID number, and you have to have the trust documents that give all the framework of what you want it to be. Again, complexity can vary. Can it be as little as $1,000 or $2,000 if it's the very early stages? There's nothing to it. Possibly. Can it be $10,000 if it's extremely complex with a lot to do? Yeah, it could. I can't really give that number because it could be more or less. It's really tough to say. Um, because it really varies a lot. So that range is tough to get. I hope
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. There's a question here. Would Woods be a trustee? I can't answer that. I don't know if Woods has corporate trustee services personally, so I don't know that. So I'm just not going. I just want to at least address that question now. That's something I don't know.
Yeah, Bob, I'm not sure on that either, but I'll provide my email, and you can shoot me an email if that works for you, and then we can find that out for you for sure.
So and thank you all for the participation. I love seeing it on here. Some common questions, some and misconceptions. So just addressing some of it. Can the trustee pay for housing payments? And mind you, I'm saying for housing payments, so things having to do with housing. It can, but there is a catch. It's important to understand how it works. So if the trust pays directly for things like rent or groceries, it can reduce the Social Security benefits that you get because of something called in-kind support and maintenance rules. Because if someone else is covering these basic living expenses, SSI may lower the monthly benefit amount. So just specific to those. There is good news though. When the trust is properly structured and managed, it won't interfere with that stuff. So um, that's why working with an experienced attorney is so important. They can help set up the trust that protects the benefits. In a with while also providing really meaningful support. So again, the trust can state what can be paid for in and out of the trust. If you have a great estate attorney who really knows those benefits in and out, the documents won't allow you to take money out for things that will impact their benefits. So, I can't emphasize enough having a great estate attorney draw up the documents, someone who really works with this specialty. It goes a long way. And I know there was the question about the cost, and I'm not telling you to spend an exorbitant amount of money, but I am telling you that when it comes to something this important, don't be don't don't hesitate to pay for what you know is quality. Is the way I'll put it. Um, you can think of it like another thing you'll notice. I love analogies, but you could think of it like packing a suitcase for a trip. You want everything that you want for that trip inside the suitcase, but there's airline rules and regulations on how much weight there is or what types of stuff you can have in there. Um, so a really well designed trust is like that suitcase. It has the right stuff in there, has everything you need, but you're not going to know, or you're not going to have any issue getting through TSA or whatever it is at the airport because you know that you're not going to have too much in there or inappropriate stuff in there. And the timing does matter. The trust should be set up early. Even if you're not sure when it's going to be needed, they can always be adjusted later. So, trust documents are drawn up. That doesn't mean that the trust documents are that way till the end of time, no matter what. They can be amended, they can be changed. So it's important to establish something early. Again, we talked about the third party special needs trust. You want that established early. So just establishing some sort of trust and trust documents that you can maybe edit later while your situation evolves. One thing I say to a lot of my clients when we first start financial planning is i- it's not it's not static, it's fluid. Everything in your life is fluid. Things come in and out of your life. Your situation's going to change. So a lot of times if you set up a special needs trust like this early, it's going to change by the end. Your situation is going to evolve. But you never know when something is going to happen that you're going to need that special needs trust. So it's important to at least have something set up for your situation as it works right now. So something that's important to talk about is home ownership by the trust. Because your home is an asset, and we talked about housing payments. So talking about rent, mortgage, etc. That's a little different. We're talking about how the housing is actually titled, who owns the house. It can be a game changer for families looking to provide long-term housing stability. So when the trust owns the home, it's not considered a personal asset because remember, the trust is just a legal entity. You can also think of the trust like a business, like the business owns the home. It's not your personal asset, or it's not the personal asset of the beneficiary. So it will not interfere with the benefits. Remember from earlier that it's not just your income, but it's also or not just the income of the beneficiary, but it's also their net worth and their assets that will determine what benefits they get. So if they personally own the house, that's going to affect it. If the trust owns the house, it will not. So the setup it provides a loved one a stable place to live. It also protects their eligibility, as I said. And again, if the trust is a third party trust, it's funded by someone else, like the parent or a grandparent. There's an added bonus that the home is shielded from Medicaid estate recovery, which you could think of like the Medicaid payback, but instead of have if if the person owns a house by themselves and, and there's a first party trust established and they pass and the house is worth X, that can be sold and used to pay back the state. So if the trust owns it, um, and your loved one passes and the house doesn't have to be sold for that Medicaid payback, it could stay in the family, it could go to another family member, pass on to other heirs, etc. So it's a really good and important tool to make sure um, you're very careful about how the house is titled. So yeah, I mean, it's like the trust is like the foundation. It's holding everything up, keeping it strong and steady, and uh, a well-structured trust is going to keep the housing secure no matter what happens. And the planning, it doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to make sure that it's correct. So something like this, it's not super complex. We all, if you own a house, um, you sit there and you title the house in your name. It's just about titling it in the legal entity's name. So it's not a super complicated thing that you have to do. With the right legal guidance, with the right setup, the trust makes those adjustments in the very beginning. And again, if it needs to evolve over time, it can do that. So just a couple real life scenarios. Um, I don't I don't use any names of people. So if for some reason these are your names and everything like that, please, it is purely coincidental. But I'm just going to give some real life. Yeah, I think it helps to understand what some of these scenarios are. Just to hear like a real scenario of, so you have Mark and Lisa, and they have a teenage son, Ethan, and Ethan's diagnosed with autism at age 4. Over the years, therapies and structured routines and adaptive tools have really helped Ethan. But they're very concerned over what happens when they're gone, who will make sure Ethan has what he needs. So they work with both a financial advisor, estate planning attorney, and they create a third party special needs trust. They fund this with a second to die life insurance policy. Um, and I'm not going to get into the complexities of what type of insurance policies they can be, but that's also a very important conversation in this scenario. Um, and they don't have to set aside a large sum now. They're young parents with a young child. and they have other things to pay for. So being able to do it this way, they pay a little bit now over time, and when one of them passes, when they both pass, a much larger sum than what they're putting in passes on, and the trust is funded. Um, the trust is designed to pay for Ethan's speech therapy, sensory equipment, even a part-time caregiver. Um, if it helps him navigate through adult life. And it also can cover his recreational activities, art classes, summer camps. So the important thing is that they established it when he was 4. And the reason why that is important is because if something happens to them, I hate to talk about the proverbial bus, but we always talk about if I walk out the door and got hit by a bus tomorrow, um, what would happen? Well, we want to plan for this trust not to just take care of Ethan when he's an adult, but what if the trust needs to be established for Ethan um, in when he's age 8 because the most unimaginable thing happened. It's important to take care of those things, and because they worked on it early and the trust is carefully structured, Ethan continues to receive Social Security and Medicaid without any interruption. Um, the trustee is a family friend, but has professional support. They have established a secondary corporate trustee just in case. And everything that Ethan needs is set up. Another similar scenario, it's not just parents. And so just another similar scenario, you have Maria, who her brother James, and Maria is in her early 40s. Her younger brother James has Down syndrome, and they never set anything up. And their parents passed away a few years ago. And now Maria is James's legal guardian, and she wants to make sure James is cared for, especially if something happens to her. So she sets up that third party special needs trust, using some of her own savings, and also some sort of life insurance policy. But she also um, changes her will and her estate plan to make sure that all of her assets are left to the trust, and not to James. So she has a corporate trustee managing the trust, and on at her and that trustee is there on her. That way, when she passes, the trustee is the corporate trust, and she knows that James is going to be well taken care of. So the trust pays for everything: transportation to his to different programs, gym membership he loves, occasional travel out to see other extended family who really care for him. It can even cover dental and therapies that aren't fully covered by Medicaid. And that trust just gives Maria that peace of mind that when she's gone, she'll be able to, that James will still be taken care of. So essentially, it's like that. The trust you know, is autopilot, and Maria, once she can't be in the cockpit, that autopilot flies the plane and really makes sure that James is taken care of for the rest of his life. Um, so final little poll before we get into some Q&A. Um, the case studies that I showed, and I understand that there's some employees of Woods, some families, things like that. Just curious if any of these case studies or any of these similar situations, um, if they present similar to someone that you work with or your own family, nothing really similar or still a little similar, or even you could just let me know. I'm still learning and still trying to figure out exactly what you're talking about. Would love to just get some feedback before we get into Q&A. Well, we'll move on to the Q&A. 1 second. I'm letting some of these.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a delay. You can see all these, Ryan, so if you want to answer them or
Yeah.
okay, great.
So, oh, I got rid of the screen sharing, which is okay too. Um, let me I just have to reconfigure my screen here now a little bit because the PowerPoint's not up on here anymore.
I think a couple people were wanted some clarification on the question for the poll, but then we are getting some Q&A, so
Yeah, I was just curious at, some of the examples. I've given a lot of examples. Um, and I was just curious of what people's how relatable, if it's similar to situations that they've been in, or that they know, or their own situations. And the trick is not to get old. Well, things happen even when you're not old. So Jeanette, I'm curious if you mean that people aren't doing planning, like that you're trying to help them with their future planning and they haven't even thought about it. Okay. Yeah, honestly, this the idea to even reach out to, I gotta thank Kristen Ferry, who was my main contact with Mary Ellen as well at Woods, was because of a client that I was helping that has someone with special needs in their family, and they never thought of this, they never knew about it. They have the means, and it's amazing how um people don't think about it. They don't plan for it. They don't know about it. I'm not going to say that, like, someone asked about the cost. It's not that it's not going to cost you anything, but relative to what you can do for your loved one's future, I think that the cost is extremely worth it, I will say, to get all of this established. And I'm hoping that hopefully I can bring some education and we can figure out more ways to educate people on what they can do, to have something like this set up. I saw someone ask, and there's questions coming in, can SSI be put into the trust? And no, SSI cannot be directly deposited into a special needs trust. So that's intended for basic living expenses, and it's paid directly to the beneficiary. So other types of income can, as I mentioned, inheritance, settlements, gifts, they can be put into the trust, but SSI and Medicaid cannot. It could be considered a transfer of assets, which would possibly jeopardize the trust.
I'm trying to go through the questions too. Peg asked, what can't you use the first party trust money on?
So it's not, the difference between first party and third party isn't about what you can use it on. It's about what happens once the trust is gone. So, or once the person passes away. So, um, as I mentioned, and um, there are a lot of things that SSI and Medicaid cover. You're not supposed to use assets from the trust to cover those things. The whole point of the trust is to allow SSI and Medicaid to pay for those and not jeopardize that. So that's really, sorry, uh, trying to, there we go. Yeah, I hope that answers it. Again, it's not about first party or third party. It's more about that. That depends on Medicaid payback at the end of it.
And then Ryan, we have, is a SNT applicable to somebody with dementia?
So it depends on their financial and medical situation. Um, if the person is disabled under the Social Security's definition, um, yes, you can set it up. But first party special needs trust must be established before the age of 65. So the issue is, if someone gets, the issue is with the formation of a special needs trust. Dementia usually comes on later in life, first of all, and usually that person has their own assets. So that's where, if you were to establish the first party special needs trust, let's say someone has really early case of dementia and they're 62, great. Technically, if someone's 80 with dementia, You could set up a third party, or 75 with dementia. You could set up a third party uh, special needs trust and fund it with someone else's money or a life insurance policy, but it gets a little hairy there. So in all technicalities, yes. Is it typically used for that? Not usually. A lot of times, again, when someone has dementia, there's long-term care is usually we usually what we do just from a financial planning standpoint is we try to ahead of time plan for long-term care situations, which is what dementia would fall under. So yeah, not quite as useful for that because you don't quite dementia, even if there, I guess if you have a very strict family history of dementia, um, sorry, I have to share this real quick. Um, this is that legal disclaimer that I was talking about. So I have to share this. That this had to go into the video. But yeah, so I just wouldn't necessarily suggest doing a special needs trust for someone with dementia. It's not going to necessarily work out. It's not the best way to plan for that.
And then we have, is there a cap on the amount you can spend at one time?
Out of the trust,
Looks like it. Yeah, that was a one question up. Yes. Yep. Yes. Out of the trust.
um, so are we talking about just for everyday expenses? Because there's no fixed dollar cap to what can be spent. So the spending needs to meet a specific criteria, you know, but there's no like, if you wanted to pay for a really nice day camp program or whatever it might be, um, that is absolutely okay. Like you don't have to cap it and say, oh, it has to be under a certain amount coming from the trust. Um,
It's furniture, hobbies, that type of thing.
from what I understand, there's no limit. Some of these are a little better for the legal experts to answer, but no, there shouldn't be. You shouldn't need to worry about, like, if the special needs trust is funded with $10 million, let's say, you don't have to buy a $300,000 house because it's a special needs trust. Like if you wanted that person to live in a $3 million house and you put enough funds into the special needs trust to be able to take care of that, that is acceptable. What I would say is make sure that the legal documents state that. So the trust documents should state that, because if you're the trustee that's purchasing all that stuff, it's going to look it's not going to work if you go to purchase things that aren't stated, like we want this. I guess you could say we want this quality of life for the person. So however the legal person would draw that up, the quality of life can be stated a certain way. Someone who has accumulated a lot of wealth and wants their child with special needs to live a certain comfort of living, they earn that right to be able to do that through the trust.
Is there a list of reputable special needs trust attorneys that we can have access to?
I have some resources. I don't know if Woods has some resources. Um, it all, again, for me with my resources, I try to be a very case by case. Different people mold well with different people. So I try to have as many different resources in my pocket as possible because, my clients, I know client A, I could have two estate attorneys who do a phenomenal job with different personalities, and one's going to fit client A better than client B. So I don't know if Woods has any resources, however, though.
Yeah, if anybody has that question, again, I put my email in the chat. And Ryan, I think we'll be sharing your contact information with the follow-up at some point, as well, if that's okay. So, we can, anybody that has questions, please email me and we can hopefully help you get those sorted out. And then SSDI different than SSI.
Um, no. I mean, we're talking about I mean, they are different programs. They're both through Social Security. So SSDI is based off of being disabled from work. SSI is based off of low end. So yes, they are different programs. Are they essentially coming from the same place and doing a similar thing for different reasons? Yeah. So the only reason I say no is because they are different, very different, because SSDI is based off of your work history as well, where SSI isn't. But they're both Social Security payments. So my gut reaction was always obviously to say, hey, they're both Social Security payments. They are different though, however.
I don't see any other questions. If does anybody have any other questions for Ryan? We've got a couple more minutes. I want to thank you so much. We really appreciated this. This is a tremendous amount of information. You did a great job presenting it, and it was nice that it was so interactive too. It makes it a little more fun. So,
I
um,
get bored listening to myself sometimes, so I try to keep it somewhat interactive.
no,
No,
we really
just kidding.
appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, and I know the people at Woods have amazing resources, and there's such a huge, and thank you all for everything you do for the community. As I mentioned, these topics, um, they hit very near and dear to my heart as well. They hit home for me. So, it's really amazing to know that we have this amazing resource right in our backyard here.
Yeah, thank you for that. Here, one last question before we go. SSDI not able to transfer special needs. I'm not sure if that's a question or MB, if you want to email me directly, we can, I can see what I can do unless you can answer that, Ryan.
Yeah, so SSDI can't be transferred into a special needs program. So, um, like if you're receiving Social Security disability, which is SSDI, remember that's based off of you becoming disabled from work. SSDI, it's Security Disability Insurance, where SSI is supplemental security income. Again, they all come from the Social Security Department. One's for people with disabilities, one's for people that become disabled. Um, so you can't redirect or assign those SSDI payments into a trust. It must be paid directly to a beneficiary. I hope that answers that.
Great. Thank you again. Thanks everybody for your participation. We really appreciate it. Again, feel free to email me if you have any questions, and we will be on our lookout for the next Wellness Wednesday, which will be